Good evening. This is a special meeting of council in support of first reading. A CAC PAC was held on September 6th to review the application. It received unanimous approval to move to first reading. The intent of first reading is to trigger a public hearing on the approval of the reclassification and rezoning request through amendments to the LUB and MPS. This meeting is called to order. The chair notes that we have quorum. CAO, are there any changes to our agenda?
Yes, Your Worship, there are. If we could remove the following. 3B, first reading, COGS rezoning application. 4, in camera. And 5, public comments, as this is a special meeting of council.
Thank you, CAO. If I could have a motion to accept the proposed agenda. Deputy Mayor, thank you for the motion. Councillor Huntley for the second. All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you very much. All right, our business is the Kentville Crossing first reading, and we had a request from Brighter Communities on behalf of the developer Mitch Brison to develop the Kentville Crossing on PID 5551774. The request is to amend the generalized future land use map and land use bylaw to residential from industrial to encourage diverse housing developments. The request is supported by C&D planning report to council and further detailed in the public participation document and additional recommendations from the planner. The recommendation for first reading was provided at the September 6th special CAC PAC meeting of council. The motion on the table is that council approve first reading of the application to change the future designation of PID 5551774 from industrial to residential zoning at the September 9th meeting of council. Further, to rezone the area marked Phase 1 on the map in the planner's report to a mixture of R3 and R4, and the Phase 2 remainder to high-density R5 residential. And further, amend the MPS and make the necessary policy changes as outlined in both the planner's report and the additional recommendation from public participation meeting document labeled additional recommendations. And further, schedule a public hearing on September 25th, 2024. Someone could move that, please? So moved. Deputy Mayor, thank you. Councillor Maxwell for the second, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council approve first reading of the application to change the future designation of PID 5551774 from industrial to residential zoning. Further, to rezone the area marked Phase 1 on the map in the planner's report to a mixture of R3 and R4, and the Phase 2 remainder to high-density R5 residential. Further, amend the MPS and make necessary policy changes as outlined in both the planner's report and additional recommendation from the public participation meeting document labeled additional recommendations. And further, schedule a public hearing on September 25th, 2024. Is there any discussion on this matter? Councillor Zabian.
Thank you, Mayor Snow. Just a question for Caroline again. I had some dialogue with you, and I'm just wondering if I want to understand this one more time. I asked this last week, and I kind of heard different things, and I want to ask you, if council decides to engage in a development agreement on this entire development, we would have to know that before it hits second reading, right? Before it's approved?
Depends on what you're asking. I think in the last meeting, I misunderstood. I explained that that back portion of the R5 would have to go through a development agreement or be subdivided and rezoned, which would come back to council as that happened. The R4 portion of the lot has the option to go between site plan approval and development agreement at the discretion of the developer. And then the R3 area, if it's over 6, would go through site plan approval. in speaking with you earlier today, I believe your question was if you wanted to make the developer go through development agreement for the entire development, what would that look like? And that would be a different approach and a different amendment. At this stage of the application, based on your municipal planning strategy and statements made in it about how council prefers site plan approval to development agreements, I feel that it would need a municipal planning strategy amendment, which would be a significant change in the documents. So if that was something that council felt was the right approach for this development, we would have to go back to advisory committee and back to public participation program to get further feedback from the public. We would also need to rewrite the amendments to reflect that hope or intention.
Desire, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for that. I understand now. I've got a full understanding of that. I'm for development 100%. I think this is going to be a great development. I know Mitch Brison does good stuff. I just think right now with the way things are, I think we should, as a council, engage in development agreements. Don't think it should be at the discretion of the developer. And I don't just mean this development. I think in general, I think we should have a little more control, and we haven't for years. And I'd like to see that happen. So I apologize for getting information maybe confused or not getting it all at the same time, but I think we all understand now the process, and if this does carry on to second reading, once it's rezoned, we have no way to go back. And so really, this is kind of like restarting if this was the desire of council, right? You'd have to go back for public participation, and because it would be a change, significant change.
It would be complete rewrite to the proposed amendments with a different approach. I based my proposal and my report based on statements made in your municipal planning strategy on how council felt about development agreements and site plan approval, which I sent you an excerpt of. So you can understand how that would impact my ability to write an amendment without actually changing that section of the municipal planning strategy.
Well, for sure, I understand now completely. It's just me, and I'm only one of a 7-piece of pie here, so I mean, the rest of council can weigh in. I just think we should do our due diligence, and I think we should have development agreements, and I think this is a good start. And if it takes another month or 2 or 3 months, I don't think it's going to impact the whole story in any which way. It'll just be done in a way that I think we can kind of take responsibility for it, and we're not going to look back in 6 months or 2 years or 10 years and say, why didn't we pay more attention? So that's my sense on that, and I'll wait for the rest of the council to chime in. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Caroline, in the C&D report on page 3, and I think I referred to this at the last special CAC meeting, where you talk about the change of the designation, you talk about the rezoning of the area, and then you get into the specific language around policy IM2, you talk about streamlining policies IM7 and 8, and then you get into strengthening existing policies GD30, GD5. So when we look at GD5, that's around development agreements and what the intention of council is, et cetera, et cetera. While we're going through first and second reading, as time goes on, not just germane to this development, but to our actual MPS and our actual LUB, we can, or the next council, can make changes to those planning documents as time progresses, and those have to go through first and second reading. But if changes are made to those such documents, as I've just outlined, particularly with regards to GD5 and also with GD30 and IM7 and 8. If those are changed based on first and second reading and public participation and public hearing, could those then be applied at the time that this development starts, or any development starts for that matter? And I may not be wording it right, and I have mentioned this to the mayor as well. You may be able to articulate it better, but I think you know what I'm trying to ask.
It's on, Caroline.
Sorry, I apologize. Okay, so your planning documents are living documents that are a reflection of the vision of council. So at any time, if there is something within your planning documents that you feel needs to be looked at by your planning staff, you can make a motion at council, same as you would make a motion for anything else. And if it carries, then your staff can be directed to take a look at how to change that or incorporate what it is that you're interested in having happen with your planning documents. That a change can always happen. Until a development has received its development permit, and it has been approved, they are required to follow whatever the law, the planning, your land use bylaw regulations are at that time. So say you approve this development based on the policies that are written, and then council decides later that they want to go back and they want to make changes. Those changes at the time, if the developer has not completed the development, will be what he must comply with.
Will apply to the.
They'll apply to the development as long as no development permit has been issued. Once a development permit or site plan approval, because they're kind of the same process, has been issued, then it is kind of grandfathered. It follows
understand.
the rules that were of the day that it was approved.
Okay, that answers my question.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. I have to agree with Councillor Zabian. I'm all for this development and development in general, but I think large lot development, and I've said it for a long time, should be through DAs. I also, and I have to word this carefully, we're using an out-of-date planning document, and we really need to bring things up to date on that. I have one question for you, Caroline. So we basically have to stick to what's in our LUB and MPS. Council can't vary from that. If council said, you know what, even though it's not in our documents, we want to do the entire development of XYZ in a development agreement.
I was recently asked this because a number of councillors are experiencing issues with short-term rental regulations that have come in from the province. And it's my understanding that there is a clause within the Municipal Government Act where council can override their land use bylaw regulations if necessary, keeping it from going to an advisory committee level and doing it from first reading to second reading as they would with a regular bylaw. However, I don't feel that clause applies when it comes to your municipal planning strategy, which is your visionary document. In that situation, you would be required to go through the full public engagement process, because what you're doing is making a change to the much larger picture. And your municipal planning strategy has been written very clearly that it would prefer not to use development agreement wherever possible, which is part of why the amendments were written the way that they were.
And I will say this, the original document, which I believe was from 2003.
I think it's 2022 it says on it, but that doesn't mean the whole thing was
because I was
redone.
I was on the Planning Advisory Committee when we redid it in 2018, 2019. But the original document that mentioned first development agreements was from the early 2000s. Yeah, I guess that's a lesson to keep your documents up to date. Thank you.
All right. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. I feel like we're wandering around in a swamp. What we're doing right now is a rezoning a piece of land from industrial to residential. That's it. We're not looking at how the build is going to take place or anything else. We're just looking at the rezoning. Are we going to let this piece of land that's right now industrial, are we going to let it go to residential? And then after that, we would deal with development agreements, site plans, and so on. Is that not correct?
No, that is not correct.
Okay, then I need to be brought out of the swamp.
I apologize because the COGS the application, which has gone consistently with this one, what you're saying is absolutely true for that application. For this application, because we're looking at a designation within your municipal planning strategy and your future generalized land use map, it is much more significant than a land use rezoning. And I don't mean to correct you in
No,
a
that's
negative
fine.
way.
I was confused.
I just want to be clear because what you're considering is much more significant than a simple rezoning.
Okay, so, all right, I think I'm headed in the right direction here. How long does it take to do a development agreement? Because I'm afraid that we're gonna just frustrate developers coming into this town so that we're gonna end up with nobody wanting to build anything here because we're dragging our feet. So how long does it take to go back and redo this whole process?
It depends on the council. It really does. You could do it concurrently, consider a development agreement as well as make the changes to your municipal planning strategy at the same time to allow for a development agreement, which might very much complicate things in the eyes of the public, and for council it might be very difficult to understand as we went through that. A development agreement itself independently can take 4 to 6 months, sometimes longer. I just supported a developer through a development agreement, and it took us almost a year to get council to approve it, and that was an as-of-right development agreement that fit within their municipal planning strategy. So it really just depends on the council and the approach and the team behind it.
Okay. So this would not be our decision, it would go to a new council. And to me, I feel very much like that's passing the buck. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. So Caroline, you said that until a permit is issued or site plan approval is issued to this particular developer, a council can still take these documents and they can make proposed changes, and it goes through first and second reading, and depending on where things come out with the new council, and if the developer has not obtained a permit and or a site plan approval, those documents would be germane to his development, correct? Yes?
Yes,
Okay.
except changes to your municipal planning strategy would have to go through your advisory committee and your public participation program
Oh, of
process.
course, yeah, we'd have
So
to
all
go
this,
first reading,
just,
second reading.
just from a
yeah.
process perspective,
Sure.
so it's clear, what we've done so far is what would be expected as you moved through making those changes.
And in your opinion, this developer is how far away from the town of Kemptville providing a site plan approval or a permit?
I mean, for the R4 section at the front of the property, that potentially could get started fairly quickly. The entire property itself, I imagine that's going to take years to develop.
I would think, and it starts with an R3 at the beginning, correct?
It's
Sorry,
R4 in the
R4
front,
and the
and
front,
then
and
there's
then
a smaller R3 section.
R3 and then R5. Okay. Do you have a recommendation?
My recommendations are based on my planning experience and my understanding of your planning documents and the intentions of council based on what's written within your planning documents. So the recommendation that sits in the planner's report is my recommendation based on your existing documents. I hear what council is saying around the table, that perhaps their intentions do not align with those existing documents, but my recommendation is coming from those.
Okay.
Councillor Zabian.
Thanks, Mayor Snow.
Wait, Councillor York just
Okay,
put hers
sorry.
on, so I have to go to her first.
Sorry.
If you just tag yours again, please. Thank you.
I understand from the meetings that we attended, the public hearings and the information sessions that we've had, there's been a lot of back and forth conversation about the importance of having industrial property, and that it was outlined as being rather important from a group that created a study about 30 years ago. But I think what's important to remember is that within that generation of time that has passed, a lot of things in the world have changed. So we have now a housing crisis, and that cannot be underscored enough. And I recognize that that is not a municipal mandate, that is a provincial mandate, but we are responsible to the citizens of the town of Kentville, regardless of our level of government. So I do think it's important that we take some of that into consideration. Secondly, manufacturing, as was understood 30 years ago, before we had computers in our pockets and in cell phones and all of this sort of things, have changed how manufacturing operates. And it's important to note that, or rather, I think it's important to note that the owner of the property who have the manufacturing sold it because they don't need that property for manufacturing. They don't plan to extend their business, and they sold it. It's important to take all of that into consideration, I think, and also going to first reading allows us to hear more from the community on this particular property, and then also as an entire concept of rezoning industrial. So I do think it's important that we take into consideration some of the concerns that were brought, or rather the concerns that were brought from the public, and we can hear further from them during the first reading process. So that's just my 2 cents on that to date. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zabia.
Thank you. Yeah, I have no issue, again, I'm just going to make this clear with the development. I think we should, as a council, set up the stage to make those amendments to the MPS and do it from the get-go, because that could take time as well. And, you know, you don't know who's going to rush there first. The MPS updated if the council agrees on it, or he could get his permit and off he goes, right? So that's an important puzzle. And I think for anybody around the horseshoe or anybody watching, if you want to look more into development agreements, I would urge you to look up West Hands, because they do them all the time, and they do them with this developer, and they do a bang-up job. So I think it's a no-brainer. And I personally, 3 months, 4 months is not going to make a crap load of difference. At the end of the day, we're still going to have a nice development there. We're going to be proud of it. Whoever's sitting up here in the whole town will. And I just say let's do it right, and let's do it the way that we should. So I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, council. Folks have had an opportunity to speak. I will remind you that as Caroline has stated numerous times, this is not a static document, and so we have the ability to make the changes. The other thing to realize is that we have not done development incorrectly or badly in the last few years, doing the things that we have done. The other thing as well is that there's several times where we are going to have intersection into the land use bylaw and the municipal planning strategy. We also have subdivision plans. We're talking about secondary planning efforts, and we have new planning staff who are taking on the full responsibility of this. So I think that we as well need to give them time to move forward. So the provincial government has identified that Nova Scotia is in a housing crisis and that housing diversity is lacking. It has challenged municipalities, and I know that it's not our responsibility, but they're asking us to prioritize housing and to support the development and building of housing through our land use and our strategy planning documents and activity. Housing reports have identified that Kentville requires 385 new units by 2027. So based on CMHC, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, since 2016, we have built 426 units in Kentville. 205 of those units were actually built in 2021, and that's the Miners Landing development. And if you think about that development, that was developed using our MPS and our LUB, and I would say that it would be a roaring success from those perspectives. So, but I think what I want you to take away is the numbers. Based on these numbers, we really can't meet our requirements for the future. And if you actually look at the town of Kentville on a Google search and look at what our population is, we are well over 7,000 and closing in on 8,000 people. So where is everybody living is the first question. And we know that this developer builds good product, and we need product in this town. And I truly believe that our documents, although they're not perfect, and as Councillor Gerard has pointed out, both him and I, and Councillor Zabian as a citizen member at the time, on our PAC, we had a grand and a great desire for development agreements. However, our planning staff didn't see it the same way, and you know, and we moved away. However, we do have robust documents, even if there are some weird things about them. I think we can get to where we need to be. So if there's nothing further, are you ready for the question? The question is on adoption of the motion to approve first reading of the application to change the future designation of PID 555-1774 from industrial to residential zoning, and further to rezone the area marked Phase 1 on the map in the planner's report to a mixture of R3 and R4, and the Phase 2 remainder to high-density R5 residential. Further amend the MPS and make the necessary policy changes as outlined in both the planner's report and the additional recommendation from the public participation meeting document labeled Additional Recommendations, and further schedule a public hearing on September 25th, 2024. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed. And the motion is carried. Thank you. We require a motion to adjourn this special meeting of council. Councillor York, thank you. Thank you. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried, and the time is 5:38. We will adjourn our, or do you want to go?
No?
No, okay. We will move into our regularly scheduled council advisory meeting at 6 p.m. Thank you very much.